Welcome to Inside the Chamber. I'm Nikki Anderson, the President and CEO of the Naperville Area Chamber of Commerce. Today, our show will focus on millennials. We know there's a lot of discussion around intergenerational work environments, and today I have the opportunity to chat with millennials to discuss the myths and the misperceptions of millennials.
Inside the Chamber is brought to you by presenting sponsor, Naperville Bank and Trust.
Our guests today include Jessica Sull from Klein Hall CPAs, Tom Peters from CBRE, and Emily Ori from Corporate Concepts. Welcome, you millennials.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
Yeah. So, it's so interesting because I know all of you very well. And when I hear some of the whisperings about millennials and entitlements and some of the negative things we hear, you guys are the antithesis of that. So let's start off with talking a little bit about that. What are some of the misconceptions that you hear about millennials, and what's your feelings when you hear, like, you guys are entitled,
Sure.
right?
So I think with any generation, right, that the misconception about any stereotype or any group of people is that we're all very different from one another. There is no defining a 20-year group of people. We have different work ethics, we have different personalities, and just like all of the other generations. So to be lumped together and have certain words tied to us, I think in general that has been a misconception.
Yeah. What do you guys think? Yeah.
You know, the most common few that I hear would be that we're lazy.
Right.
The entitlement, of course.
Yeah.
Disloyal. And then there's a little bit more unique ones, like we don't want to get married. We don't practice religion. And to me, it couldn't be further from the truth. I think it depends on the person, of course. But, there's reasons behind all of them. Would you agree with that?
Oh, absolutely. One of the biggest things I hear is that we are not hard workers. Like you said, we're lazy. And I just don't find that to be true, I guess. Some of the hardest working people I know are millennials because we're so eager to prove ourselves, to take advantage of opportunities that are out there. I just don't agree with that. Some of our hardest workers in our office are millennials, and sometimes I have to shoo them out of our office. You know what I mean?
Well, something else that I'm hearing too, and even with my own kids, is there's this need for service, for giving back, that I think is very different from the previous generation. And we don't talk a lot about that. Would you agree that your peers, like, it's that service piece, that giving back, that philanthropy is really important?
I mean, something that I hear among millennials is that when they go to look for a job, they want to know that what they're doing is making a difference or giving back in some capacity. Yeah. And I think that is something that the older generation struggles with, is that they are thinking, just take a job. If it pays you, that's all you need. Just go to work every day and work hard. And our generation is more, what is this going to do? Not even just for me personally, but how is this going to contribute to society? How am I going to make the world a better place? They want to come home at the end of the day knowing that they made an impact in some way.
Yeah.
And again, I feel like every generation has a combination of both. And some of the most generous givers of their time and their service are not in our generation. And you look at someone like Chad Pedigo, who his world is revolved around service, and he's a millennial. So again, I think I find it hard to attach one stereotype to any age group.
I agree with that. Yeah, absolutely.
So when I think you all work in multi-generational environments, right?
Yes.
So do you guys find a challenge, or not particularly? And if you do find a challenge, what is it?
Go ahead.
You know what? There's a couple different things, but the one that I find most common is the communication barrier. We're technology driven. I think we were born and raised with it, but baby boomers and Generation Xers weren't necessarily raised with it, so they prefer to call on the phone, or if you're 5 feet away, to get up and walk to the desk. Whereas I've got coworkers that are my age emailing me and we're still 4 feet away. So balancing that so that you're hitting the priorities of the older generation, but also accommodating the younger generation as well, and making sure your communication style is ultimately the most effective.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I think a lot of that comes from the education, right? Like, not only as an individual, educating yourself on how other generations prefer to be communicated with,
Right.
But then also educating the other generations about how we prefer to be communicated with. And our company brought in Rick Lochner, who does a really great generational talk, generations in the workplace talk. And he came in and presented to our company about the different generations and what motivates us, how do we communicate, why do we communicate that way, and it helps, right? Because you start to understand that my colleague who is a boomer, if I need an answer, I shouldn't email her. I should call her and ask, and I'll get an answer right away. And until you learn that about the other generations, until you open up your mind a bit to understand and accept that, communication can be a challenge.
Absolutely.
So, okay, I need to ask all of you guys this one. So when my kids call me, if I don't answer, they don't leave a message. Do you guys leave messages?
It's because we hate voicemails.
They hate voicemails, right?
See, and that's so interesting.
But I think the benefit to growing up in a multi-generational company would be learning how to take those things. So, I have to take the voicemail, but my brother, who's a little younger than I am, he tells my mom every day, do not leave me a voicemail, send me a text message, otherwise I won't respond. And it's super common.
The first time that I did that with my kids, I didn't leave a message, they called me right back. Because they're like, wait, you usually leave a message. And it's interesting what you were talking about technology and how you guys were raised on technology. In our office, we have interns that come in, and one of the interns had to work with a boomer. And so when she was leaving, I did an exit interview. I said, what was the biggest challenge you had working here? And she said, I never understood the lack of technology savvy in the boomer generation, and what comes very naturally to me does not come naturally to someone 40 years my senior. And so she was very humbled by that experience, and I would guess that you have probably found that as well.
It's definitely apparent in the financial sector, especially where we're trying to move to be more paperless. I often get frustrated when I work with people who will take something on the computer, print it out, and then turn around and scan it back in. I'm like, well, what's the purpose of that? You ended up putting it back on the computer anyways. One of the biggest difficulties that I've had is the resistance to change. And one of the biggest barriers to change is technology. They want to still do things their way, so that's why they're taking it from a medium that they don't understand, printing it out because that's something that is familiar to them. They like having the paper, but then they at least still realize that they still need to convert. It's like they're converting back and forth and back.
Right.
And so that's something that I guess millennials have difficulty with, understanding that they need to be able to understand that conversion and being able to communicate, like you said, being able to communicate in a way that other people understand.
Sure. So I heard a presentation once that anything that is around when you're born, any technology or anything in life that is there when you're born is considered normal. Anything that's invented between the ages of 15 and 35, that person interprets that as new and exciting. Maybe you could get like a career in that path. And anything invented after the age of 35 is against the normal way things should work. And so there's a lot of, it makes a lot of sense when you think about the stereotypes and the other finger pointing at the generation or the new thing. There's kind of negativity around that. Usually from 35 and older, there's apprehension toward it, and it kind of makes a lot of sense when you think of it as, we were born into a way, and talk about the new generation entering the workforce. I mean, they even more than millennials, they entered with iPhones around, and so thinking for me, in 10 years when I'm no longer a young professional, I will be over 40, what am I going to then look back on and be apprehensive toward or put a guard up toward what will I have a problem with.
You know, just the other day, I read something online where somebody posted something and said, "I'm so grateful that I grew up in a time where there was, I can't remember what the specific technology, I think it was CDs. I'm so grateful that I grew up in a lifetime where I got to see CDs." And I was thinking, why? Why? Because it's exactly what you said. To us, that was normal. And so we think that that was something that we can fall back on. And we're like, oh, this was, I mean, I'm sure older people feel that way about 8-tracks and things that we, when we look back, we're like, wow, I can't believe people were, but I mean, soon we're going to be outdated, and these kids are, I mean, there's a video out there of kids holding up really old, they're like Game Boys and old technology, and they're like, I don't know, what do you do with this? I don't know how to download the apps to this, and so already we're starting to see the effects of that, which is interesting.
Excuse me, I think part of the resistance is coming from a little bit of fear of maybe being obsolete, or just coming from a lack of knowledge. I know working with some of the older Generation X and certainly the baby boomers in my office, it's not knowing how to work the email, the Outlook, or not knowing how to format a document that just sets them off the wall. But as soon as they learn that technique, it's like the world has changed.
Yeah.
So
Like anything.
yeah, I think it comes with education, and I think ultimately, when you're faced with something that could put you obsolete in a technology-driven world, having that knowledge and the education would make someone feel a lot more comfortable.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. I remember trying to teach my grandfather how to use a computer, and it was the most frustrating thing. It's like, you don't have to bang the keys, it's not a typewriter. But that was what he was raised with, a typewriter, and you had to, you know, in order to, so it's fascinating. What would be one thing that, you know, there's a saying that we all want to be understood, right? So if you were sitting in an office meeting and we were going around and you had to share one thing that you wish people knew about maybe you or you as a millennial in this office environment, what would it be?
That I'm open to your ideas, I think. A lot of people think that millennials are stuck in their ways, and we do what we're familiar with, just like any other generation does what they're familiar with.
Right.
And I think we often come across like we have a strong opinion, and we can maybe dive into that later about how we were raised and why that might be that way. But ultimately, we want to be efficient, we want to be productive. So even if we don't show that we want to learn your way of doing it, if your way is better, tell us, because although we like structure, we also want to be productive and efficient and learn the best way to do it.
And with that, we'll be right back.
Naperville Bank and Trust has the expertise, knowledge, and experience to help you reach your business goals.
We would prefer to work with somebody like Naperville Bank and Trust. They're engaged in the community, they're able to help meet our financial needs, they understand us as a business.
They provide all the tools that you would ask that we as a growing business need of a bank. Most importantly, to me, it's a great personal relationship we have with Tom and John and our bankers.
It was the best thing we could have done in banking. Banking can be very cold. What the bank brings to us is that warm feeling when you come into the bank and people say, "Hi, Greg."
It's about being part of the community again, about being a name again, about having credit for who your business is instead of just being a number.
Naperville Bank and Trust. Bring it home.
So what I want to talk about next is failure. There's a lot of talk about the millennials, and my kids are your age, and when they were in sports, everybody won. And so there's this concern that because everybody wins, there's, you know, kind of that sense of entitlement. So what do you think about the idea of failure? Are there plenty of millennials that believe in the importance of failing, or do you think everybody should win?
Do you want to start?
So the whole entitlement thing, everyone got a trophy. What I feel is often left out of that conversation is that as a 12-year-old, you know, player of any sport, us millennial in the making 12-year-old didn't give us a trophy, right? So we're a product of how we were raised. And I feel like we kind of get a bad rap because we all got a trophy when we didn't give ourselves that trophy.
It was the baby boomers.
It was the boomers, right? So again, I hate the finger pointing, and I think it's all about understanding. But I think that's so often left out of the conversation. I also feel that the word entitled could positively be replaced with confident. So the benefit of everyone getting a trophy is that as a whole, I think that we were built up with that positive reinforcement, the trophy being the positive reinforcement. And what that does is builds confidence in ourselves. And so you look at how many entrepreneurs, we have in our 20 and 30-year-olds, how many new ventures are being created. And I relate that to the fact that we were raised with the confidence to go try that. With that naturally comes failure, and I think as an adult, of course, we can all credit the growth that you can gain from failure. I don't know that I would totally write off the way that we were raised. Like I just stated, I think a lot of positives came out of that positive reinforcement. I also think a lot of us, when we have children, realize that you have to work for something in order to get something. And like any generation, you learn from the way you were raised and you want to change things. But
yeah, and to her point, I'd like to separate the entitlement and the fear of failure. I think they're two very important separate issues, and they also are congruent at the same time. And the entitlement, to me, is more of a growth mindset than anything. We're so motivated by success. It's not that we want an unwarranted gift, or an unwarranted celebration. It's just that we're striving for the best and we want to get to that point. So we're so focused on growing, getting that next title, getting that promotion, getting the raise, that to not receive that is devastating. But we don't want an unwarranted celebration. If we lose, I think we could probably face the fact that we lost. And when you come to the reality, and the market doesn't care if you're 8th or you're 3rd or 4th, you lose if you're not 1st or 2nd, right? So
I also find the workplace that we're in right now, I think more than ever, gender doesn't play as big of a role, race doesn't play as big of a role, and I think that because we're in that environment, we're feeling like, why should age play that big of a role?
Right.
Almost like ageism is the new genderism or the new racism. And again, going back to how we were raised, if you put the effort in, and maybe that's the difference, right, is that the three of us obviously do put the effort in.
Right.
And like any generation, you have the people who try and the people who don't.
Sure.
Just like 40 or 50 or 60-year-olds, you have the people who try and the people who don't.
Yeah.
I think that the issue with the entitlement is more of a trust issue for millennials, because we grew up knowing that we could trust our parent, the whole helicopter parent situation where we trusted that we were going to be taken care of no matter what. There's somebody that we would be able to fall back on if something didn't go right. And then as we started to actually grow up and enter adulthood, enter the real life, we started to realize that we were taking on a lot of burdens, such as student loans, things like that.
Right.
Sure, yeah.
Then when we entered the workforce, I find that a lot of millennials feel stuck in their job. The reason that we're seen as job hoppers is often because they enter the workforce and it turns out that they can't get promoted past a certain level because, we have to wait for so-and-so. I was just talking about this with somebody yesterday where she said, I love my job, it's close to my house, and they told me that they want to promote me, but they just can't because I have to wait for another lady to either be relocated or retire soon. And so that puts her in she says, well, what am I supposed to do? Because I want to I think the whole thing with millennials is they want progress. They want to know that they're headed somewhere. So this girl doesn't want to stay stagnant at her job for 3 years, even though she's assured that she's going to be promoted. That's not enough for her. And I think that that's what it is with us. That's where it circles back to the whole trust issue, is that we want to know that we're being taken care of, but at the same time, we want to know that we're progressing, moving forward, making a difference.
And making money potentially to pay off that 40 grand debt that is really new in our generation. I think Exers had, the researchers, Exers had half the debt that we do on average. So 40 grand in debt when you graduate at 21, no wonder we're a little anxious to start making money to pay off that debt and move forward.
And Jessica, you spoke to a great point. I think the disloyal myth about millennials comes into play here because It's not that we're disloyal, but we're looking for a couple things. In a company, I think we want to know that the company's investing in us as much as we are in them. We really care about that interaction with the mission of the company, the philanthropic, civic duty of the company. And I also feel like we're given more options now, where the baby boomers may have had one shot and they were going to give it everything they had no matter what. They're going to climb uphill in the snow and they're going to climb downhill in the snow no matter what,
Yeah.
And I think we're faced with a lot of options where we can say, listen, there's a better opportunity. The grass is greener over here. I think I want to take that chance.
Well, you bring up such a great point. It was almost like an aha moment. The expectation. When I was growing up, there really wasn't an expectation. You may or may not go to college. You may have a family. I was a woman, so it was still you get married and you have babies. But there really wasn't that expectation. And I think because me as a parent, we had more open conversations with our kids, and there was this expectation, look, the world's your oyster, man.
Yeah.
So make it happen.
Right.
And so when you were talking earlier about that it was the baby boomers that handed out the trophies,
Yeah.
well, it's us that put these expectations on our kids that you can have anything you want.
Yeah.
Well, everybody processes that a little bit differently. So what does that mean? So that is such a great point, and great conversation. You guys are giving me lots of food for thought. I've also heard from some people that when you guys get out of college that you walk into that office and you want the corner office that has the best view and you want that six-figure salary. I think it goes back to what you were saying, Tom, about, well, yeah, we want to be successful, but not unwarranted. So you all, I'm going to assume you all agree that you got to work for it, man.
Sure.
Right? If you want it, you got to work for it.
Absolutely.
Definitely.
I think more so than ever, it's also our duty to kind of prove that myth wrong. There are a lot of people that go in and probably demand higher salaries and things of that nature, but I think there's another sect of those millennials that truly go in before 9 o'clock and stay later than 5. And there's also a little bit of truth to kind of playing the part that you want to become. And so by wanting that private office in the corner and the great view, it's kind of allowing that millennial to envision themselves as the chief executive running the company down the road 20 years, 15 years down the road.
I completely agree with that. I often find, I remember when I would be interviewing for jobs, one of the questions they would ask was, where do you see yourself in 5 years? Well, that's a loaded question, because if you don't say, I want to be in the corner office and I want all this success, then they think, oh,
You're not
we don't.
driven.
Yeah, you're not. Then they think that you're not driven.
question.
Why?
Yeah.
That's why it's a loaded question. You could answer it. No matter how you answer it, somebody's going to interpret it in a negative way.
Yeah.
If you just say, "Oh, I just want to be a hard worker. I'll do whatever I can," they're like, "Oh, well, you don't seem very driven. All you just want to do is show up and go to work."
Right.
But if you say that, then they're thinking, "Oh, you think that you're going to."
You want everything right now.
You
Yes.
bring up another great point. I think the lack of hard work that we get associated with can also just be related to the fact that we want balance in our lives. I mean, it's okay to work 9 to 5 and have priorities. You want to come home and work out, and you want to go volunteer, and you want to spend time with your family. That stuff's important, and I think baby boomers were raised with the notion of you make it work and you do what you have to do until you can provide for your family and the things that you need to live. And now we're kind of in a world where we can take time for ourselves. If you want to go to a movie with your spouse or spend time with your kids at home, that stuff's important to us. And so that shouldn't get confused with not wanting to work hard, particularly when you think about how efficient we can be with technology and how that all kind of comes into play.
And again, our influence as boomers is we have said to our kids, you don't have to work 120 hours, man.
Sure, yeah.
Find that balance. We did that, and we were, just a gerbil running on the wheels. So I've encouraged my kids, find that balance in your life. So it's not that they're lazy, it's that we've encouraged our kids to find the balance. So
the other kind of interesting thing, I think, again, looking at all of the generations, there's a comedian, Adam Conover, who does a really great presentation on generations and how it's not generations, it's people. We're all people, right? And he talks a lot about 50 years ago, New York Magazine had a cover page that was about the boomers, and the me decade. Me was like capital letters. And then you fast forward to 2013, and who was it, like Times or someone, Times, I think, had me generation about millennials. So nothing, when you really get down to it, what has changed?
Yeah.
The media continues to call us, narcissistic and entitled. And in 1985, they had an article about how the 20 and 30-year-olds of the time were so self-absorbed because they kept videotaping themselves on their new devices, their camcorders. Does this sound familiar?
Selfies.
Right.
Yeah.
It's just that the same stuff continues to come up, and I think a lot of it is just educating yourself on we're not that different. I mean, the way we work, the way we communicate, it's worth getting to know, but have a little bit of empathy for each other, and we all have something to offer. So learning about that.
Which is great, because I'd like to wrap up with this. I'd like to talk about what you're most proud of, the millennial generation. What are you most proud of?
What I'm most proud of is that we're really collaborative as a group. We love to work together. I often hear that people have the opportunity to work from home and they actually don't want to. They actually prefer coming to the office and having face-to-face interaction, contrary to what people say where they think that we can't socialize outside of our cell phones. But that's something really amazing I think that we have as I guess compared to 20 years ago where it was more value to stab your neighbor in the back to climb up in the workplace. I find that's not true at all in today's workplace.
Yeah, I think our initiative to become educated and informed is probably what I'm most proud of. I've read numerous times that we're the most educated generation. The MBA has become more popular now than it's ever. I think college graduation rates are at its highest they've ever been. And becoming informed on social issues as well. We've taken a huge stance in this recent political environment, and I think that's something we should really be proud of, because we're trying to become more educated so that we can give back and ultimately carry on the legacy and the generation that baby boomers bring going forward for the rest of our lives and forward.
I've definitely seen that switch with my kids and their friends with their interest in politics, which was never the case before.
Right. Yeah.
So it's really wonderful. What about you?
Just that I think we're curious, and I think that we are confident enough to try new things and to take a stand and to speak up.
Yeah, wonderful. I know for me, I have learned sitting and talking to you. So when the show airs, I am going to be so proud to share it with so many people, and especially those of us that tend to forget how great your generation is, but how great all generations are. Yeah. And instead of finding some of the negatives, because it makes for good news, to remember all of the wonderful things that each generation has brought. So, Tom, I thank you. Emily, I thank you. And Jessica, I thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
And we'll be right back. Thank you for joining us for Inside the Chamber. We hope you found the information from today's show valuable. Please join us for our next Inside the Chamber, and in the meantime, remember, when you're looking to shop, dine, or stay, think Chamber and visit naperville.net to support our members.